2 days after D-Day, Nazi soldiers find an abandoned landing craft stranded in the Vire estuary in Normandy. On board, they find papers marked top secret. These documents detail Allied targets listed for the next few weeks. It is a spectacular coup of intelligence gathering. The Nazis now know where and when to launch surprise counterattacks. But Adolf Hitler is not convinced. He believes the Allies are playing a deadly game of deception, and he is certain the main invasion is yet to come at Calais. The entire Nazi regime is completely duped. The plans are real, but the Nazis think they're fake. They have been outplayed by one of the greatest acts of deception in military history, Operation Bodyguard. This program reveals the hoaxes and secrets behind the operation that defies belief. A complex network of double agents, misinformation, and elaborate decoys, all with one goal: to land Allied forces safely on the beaches of Normandy. 1944. Operation Overlord. D-Day. The Allied invasion of Western Europe. Soldiers storming the beaches must break through formidable obstacles. The most massive, Hitler's Atlantic Wall. It stretches over 1,500 miles from the Arctic Circle to the Spanish border. From 1940 on, enormous concrete bunkers are built along the French coast. In 1 month alone, almost 1 million cubic yards of concrete are poured in its construction. In November 1943, legendary Field Marshal Erwin Rommel takes over command of German defenses. He works tirelessly to ensure that no Allied soldier makes it to the beach alive. He orders over 6 million mines laid, many placed on wooden posts to sink boats. Thousands of steel spikes, called hedgehogs, are sunk into the sand to halt enemy tanks. All are deadly obstacles for Allied forces. But the Allies are hopeful. Recent amphibious invasions have gone remarkably well. In 1942, in Operation Torch, British and American troops land safely in North Africa. Troops that helped defeat the German and Italian forces in the Desert War. In 1943, Operation Husky lands Allied troops in Sicily. Again, the amphibious landings are successful, and in September, mainland Italy is invaded. The Allies are diverting German forces from the Russian front. But one invasion was disastrous. August 19, 1942, Dieppe, France. Canadian and British troops lead a raid on the Atlantic coastal defenses. 1,000 Canadians are killed, and another 2,000 are captured. In November 1943, Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt meet in Tehran. Stalin is desperate for a larger West European front. On the Eastern Front, he is losing hundreds of thousands of men. What Stalin doesn't know is, a decision has already been made. 6 months earlier, Churchill and Roosevelt met at the Trident Conference in Washington. In the face of sobering reality, they decide to invade Nazi-occupied Europe from across the English Channel. Planning begins, and May 1944 is selected as the time of attack. Churchill and Roosevelt must minimize the casualties expected from such a direct assault on the Third Reich. German forces had bitterly resisted the Allied landings in Italy at Salerno and Anzio. The Allies expect even stronger resistance in France. They know they can rely on the training and sheer guts of their soldiers, but they must give them every possible advantage. This means calling on the most brilliant and dangerous methods of unconventional warfare. Enter Operation Bodyguard, an intricate web of subterfuge and secrecy. Its one aim: save Allied lives on the beaches of Normandy. 1944, the Allies have decided to invade Western Europe. U.S. troops are transported to Britain. This is the largest buildup to an amphibious assault the world has seen. Hundreds of thousands of Allied troops practice the skills needed to meet Nazi forces head-on and defeat them. Allied commanders study past invasions to see what lessons they can learn. An earlier victory proved that Allied intelligence, along with trained forces, can help win the battle. Before Allied forces landed in Sicily, the body of a British Royal Marine officer carrying vital documents washed ashore on a beach in Spain. German agents confiscated the briefcase. The documents they found implied that the Allies would attack Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily as the Germans expected. The documents were considered authentic. Hitler then massed his troops in Greece and Sardinia and left the southern coast of Sicily vulnerable. And that is exactly where the Allies landed. The body and its letters were fakes, and the hoax saved thousands of Allied lives. June 8, 1944, Hitler will face a similar dilemma. Germans find Allied plans in an American landing craft. Those plans are real, but Hitler will dismiss them as fakes. This is part of a new plot to direct misinformation at Germany again, but on an even greater scale. The plan is codenamed Operation Bodyguard. It is a scheme that covers at least 6 principal operations of deception and 36 subordinate plans. Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan, Chief of Staff to the Supreme Allied Commander, is in charge of planning the invasion, now codenamed D-Day. His British and American staff is based in London at the Norfolk House in St. James Square. Their first task: to identify a landing zone. 2 potential spots are targeted. The first is at the Pas de Calais, directly across the Channel. The second, further south on the beaches of Normandy, between the Seine and the Cotentin Peninsula. The Pas de Calais is the most obvious choice. It is only 22 miles away from the British port of Dover. It has gentle sandy beaches and is where the Germans anticipate a landing. But in a brilliant move, Morgan decides to dupe them and go for Normandy. Aerial reconnaissance of the area is stepped up. Special forces creep ashore at night. They sample the sand to test its suitability for landing armored vehicles. A contest is contrived, and a radio broadcast asks the British public to send in holiday snapshots and postcards. Views of Normandy are then studied minutely by Allied intelligence. Vacationers wading through the sea let them know the water's depth. Parked cars indicate exits on the beaches. Scientists and engineers are called upon to design weapons to counter beach defenses, like tanks armed with spinning chains that ignite landmines. In the months leading up to the assault, Churchill personally studies many of the ingenious devices created to help the landing forces. In his bathtub, he tests the principal engineering of an artificial harbor for transport ships at Normandy. One highly imaginative but impractical concept is the use of man-made icebergs as aircraft carriers. But all of this work won't matter if the Germans are waiting in force for the Allied landing. The Allies have only one shot at storming the beaches. The Germans must be convinced that the invasion will take place at the Pas de Calais. Deception will be the greatest weapon. Central to Operation Bodyguard is the London Controlling Section, masters at creating intricately elaborate hoaxes. They use counter-espionage as a key element in the operation. German spies in Britain are under orders to pick up any signs of preparation for invasion. Their task is not difficult. Some 2 million American, British, and Canadian soldiers are based in southern England. Millions of tons of supplies are being moved around. Thousands of military vehicles are parked on roadsides or in fields. It's hard not to notice that something is happening. But in one of the biggest coups for Operation Bodyguard, all of the major German spies in Britain are working for the British as double agents. Tracked down and confronted, many German spies were either executed or turned. German intelligence is being fed massive amounts of false information. Colonel Roger Hesketh recalls how important these agents were to the Allied landing plans.
Because there are two ways of conveying a false plan to the enemy. One is, which I was responsible for, was what we then called special means. And that meant any form of control leakage. Well, control leakage simply means telling the story virtually, verbally, and passing the message around. And you could do it through diplomatic channels. You could do it in many ways. But in our case, we did it almost entirely through the German agents who we had taken here and turned round, so they were working for us instead of the enemy. And in that way, we divided the story between them and passed it along.
The double agents are run by a section of MI5 under the control of the Double Cross Committee. One of their leading agents is Wolf Dietrich Schmidt, codename Tate. He is caught by the British in 1940 within hours of landing by parachute in the countryside near Cambridge. Tate spends the next 4 years sending misleading information back to Germany, including reports of bogus gatherings of troops in different parts of the country. Another double agent is a Spanish journalist named Juan Pujol Garcia, codename Garbo. Garbo invents an imaginary network of 30 sub-agents that bring him information. An enormous task pulled off by sheer genius. Sarah Bishop, one of Garbo's assistants at MI5, remembers the complexity of this fictitious network.
All the agents were imaginary. None of them existed. There were 7. And quite a lot of them had sub-agents. So it was a notional network. You had to remember or keep a record of where they were all supposed to have been so that they could work together and coincide. They all had their own characteristics, and some information could be sent by one agent but not by another, because it'd be the sort of thing that he would never find out or be interested in. They each had their own sphere of work. And as they weren't there at all, of course, it would be easy to get them mixed up. The agent in Liverpool was too well placed, so he had to be got rid of somehow or other. So he died.